Hi, if you're new here, my name is Sable, and I talk about comics and all things nerdy. So I heard a rumor that the Supergirl movie is not doing well in its test screenings. And before the conversation divulges into something that's negative and counterproductive, I wanted to address why I think the test screenings are probably not going well, and that is simply because of the villain that they chose. When I first saw the trailer for the Supergirl movie, I was really excited to see Jason Momoa's Lobo. I know this is a role that he has been pushing for a while, and I was excited to see him get it because I think that he would do a really good job, and I think that he looks fantastic in the costume. Like, I have yet to see something so comic book accurate in a comic book movie in such a long time. His casting was such a breath of fresh air for me. However, I did also see that he didn't have a lot of clips in the trailer, which led me to believe that he is either going to be playing a minor role or only making a cameo in the movie. And I just think that if that's the case, that would be such a missed opportunity. I don't see how not having Momoa's Lobo as the main villain is going to be beneficial to the movie. But if he's going to be in the movie at all, he should definitely be playing an important part. He needs to be a top contender in the DC universe in general moving forward. But my guess is that the problem with the movie is not Lobo not being the main villain. It's who they did choose to be the main villain, which is Krem. And this is a more recent issue I see in comic book movies, where they take minor villains or they take less flashy villains and try to make them the center of a movie. And this is also grounded in the hyper-realism that comic book movies are so obsessed with preserving for some reason. But a lot of villains nowadays are just not recognizable. And in my opinion, the villain of a comic book movie is just as important as the superhero. If you go back to Raimi's Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, the villain of that movie is Green Goblin, and he is just as iconic to the first movie as Spider-Man is. So much so that they even brought him back in the No Way Home movie. Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight is still considered one of, if not the greatest iteration of the Joker character ever. The villain in a movie needs to be just as compelling as the superhero. And the problem with a lot of superhero comic book movies nowadays is that the focus is so solely on the main character that they just try to give them an antagonist who just makes their goal more difficult, but is not really compelling as a character on their own. And those villains end up being very, very forgettable. Take a lot of the Marvel villains before Thanos. A lot of them are not very memorable, and they don't really serve the movie as a villain. They mostly serve as an antagonist while the superheroes fight amongst themselves. And I see this pattern starting again with DC because Superman is already having conflict with the Justice Society in the movie. That seems to be the main source of Superman's conflict and his conflict with Lois Lane. Not so much Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is the main villain, don't get me wrong. But Superman's journey is less about his fight against Luthor and more about his fight within himself, especially with what they did with his background with his parents. Superhero movies are becoming very self-reflective and introspective, which is not inherently a bad thing. But if you're trying to make summer blockbusters, you need blockbuster type villains and blockbuster type conflict. This is just not the medium to continue exploring these superhero struggles. In my opinion, I feel like that's best left to the comics, who do a better job of understanding the characters and their history anyway. When we go to see comic book movies, we're going to see a comic book movie. And I just think that Supergirl is unfortunately going to make this same mistake. I don't think that Krem was the right villain for this first movie. And funny enough, if we look at Gunn's history with movies, especially with Guardians of the Galaxy, he's used to taking minor characters and making them into big household names. And I think that's probably what he's trying to do here. But when it comes to the super family, when it comes to the Kryptonians, they have way too many villains to choose from already for you to pick someone who's not going to bring crowds in. In my opinion, I think Lobo should have been the main villain. Hopefully, with his introduction, the movie will be successful enough to warrant bringing him back. But with the poor test screenings, I am starting to get a little nervous, and I was really excited to see this movie, but hopefully they're able to turn around. But let me know what you think.